one religious tradition in the Ozarks. There's no such thing as this Ozark religion, and there never really has been. There's always been a multiplicity of groups here. I want to talk about 6 different traditions, and I'm leaving people out. And that's just impossible, even in this area, to cover every group. I want to talk about some big categories of religious groups. Ozarks Evangelical Protestants, who are probably the dominant religious tradition. Ethnic Protestants, people from different European countries, as well as the African American Church. We'll talk about other ethnic Protestants under number 5. Being Catholic in the Bible Belt. What is it like to be Catholic in the Ozarks? There have been Catholics in the Ozarks for a very long time. Ozarks Jewish communities. New immigrant religious communities. I'll spend a lot of time here, probably more time than on some of these other points here, talking about Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, and other newcomers to the Ozarks. And then nuns in the Ozarks. Now, I'm not talking about Julie Andrews and the Sound of Music. Not that kind of nun. But N-O-N-E, as it's spelled. People that say nun when asked, what is your religion? And that's also a category in the Ozarks. And there have always been people that, if there was a survey, would have given that answer. In the rural Ozarks, evangelicals are even more dominant. So Southern Baptists, this is Shannon County. Has anyone been to Shannon County? Eminence, Winona. It's a little less densely populated than other counties. Southern Baptist, number 1. Methodist, number 2. Churches of Christ, Christian Church. Assemblies of God, Church of God of Prophecy. Catholics, 70. Churches of Christ, 55. And 12 Mennonites, who can all get in the church van. Okay, Lebanon high school students have helped document this evangelical slice of the Ozarks. They did not take this photo, because it looks like a long time ago, 1907. But it was in a magazine published out of this high school called Bittersweet. And they did articles on singing, gospel and hymn singing in the Ozarks, a system called Shape Note Sing Group. Speaking of bridges, new immigrants and new religions in the Ozarks. This is a real well-known book among scholars called The New Religious America, How a Christian Country Has Become the World's Most Religiously Diverse Nation. And actually, I think India might be more diverse religiously than we are. But we've become a lot more diverse. And that's showing up in Springfield and other places in the Ozarks, including groups like Sikhs, who have been influenced by both Islam and Hinduism. And it's interesting, sometimes you don't know they're there, new religious immigrants, because if you drove by, what would you assume that this is? Would you think this is a Sikh temple? What would you think it is? Yeah, and why? Why would you think that? Obvious marker, what? There's a cross. And it's on their website like that. I think they just left it there. I don't think they're going to get a lot of people who are hostile to the building, though, because they're like, oh, it's a Baptist church or something like that. Inside, distinctive cultural traditions from India. Outside, American flag, patriotism, and the cross. Now, I don't know, maybe that was early on. A lot of congregations don't have a lot of money, and then once they get money, they build their own type of architecture. This is the Bentonville Islamic Center. It looks like a split-level house, the kind of house I grew up in the 70s and 80s. It doesn't look like a mosque, does it? And maybe that's part of the attraction to such spaces, because if it's hard to be Jewish in the Ozarks, it's even harder to be Muslim in the Ozarks, probably. This is not the Springfield Islamic Center. Have you seen this building? Has anyone been to a concert at the Shrine Mosque? Or maybe, I don't know, cage fighting or something? Or, I don't know, everybody from Elvis to Frank Sinatra have performed at the Shrine Mosque. Bob Dylan, which, I don't know, your parents might have listened to Bob Dylan. One of my friends saw them loading Bob Dylan's stuff there, and he walked up to the tour bus. And one of the roadies said, "That's a Bubby's stool. You want to hold it?" So he held Bob's chair. But that's aside from our topic, which is Islam, which this is not an example of Islam, except, what do they call it? What do the Shriners call it? Shriners are a Masonic group. They're Freemasons. And they build hospitals for children who have disabilities and things like that. And they have charities, and they ride around in those little cars and parades, the Shriners. But it's called the Shrine Mosque. And actually, a student from India called home and said, "Mother, the mosque in Springfield is even bigger than the one back home." Well, one of my students said, "You know that it says there is no God but Allah on the Shrine Mosque in Springfield." And I thought, grandmothers and their stories. It's just a crazy grandma story. Well, it's true. This is, in fact, in 4 places there are these architectural motifs. And if you look at their application to be a historic site, it says, additional Moorish-inspired decorative elements are executed in pale blue and deep gold, including an inscription at the summit of each pavilion in Arabic. There is no God but Allah. This was built in the 1920s in Springfield. So since the 1920s, there is no God but Allah has been over the cityscape of Springfield, Missouri on Route 66, as hundreds of thousands of people have gone from Chicago to Los Angeles. Just a fun fact, but it's interesting because they were interested in Middle Eastern architecture because it was kind of cool, and also the Shriners have kind of a Middle Eastern motif with the fezzes and things like that. They're not Muslims though. This is the Springfield Islamic Center, which looks much more like some of the other buildings we've looked at. This could be a church, it could be a synagogue, it's very nondescript, and it's hard to find. And that's also, I think, by design because, again, it's not so easy to be a religious minority. It's kind of on the north side of Springfield. It's near a small airfield and some TV stations. It's a very commercial area. It's not on a main drag at all. Unfortunately, it got defaced by graffiti, and burnt Korans were thrown outside of it, which it didn't make the national news, which is good because I think there would have been, perhaps more violence. Religious groups came together to support the Islamic Center. Christians, Jews, and others gathered in support of the Islamic Center less than 2 weeks after the 3 Korans were found outside the building. And you can see a picture from that event, and almost all non-Muslims coming to say, this is not acceptable in our community for people to harass you. The Islamic Center in Joplin looked like this a few years ago. This was from a KSMU radio story on the Islamic Center. Unfortunately, an arsonist who they later caught, and it was because he wanted to burn a mosque. It wasn't like he accidentally burned a mosque. In fact, he tried earlier in the summer. Was burned on August 6, 2012, and nothing left. These are the ruins of the Joplin Mosque. How many of you have heard about that? Nobody? A couple people. Some churches reached out and said, this is not who we are in Joplin. There were several in Joplin expressing love in the aftermath of the fire. This is a project of religion journalists out of MSU. They just put "Love Thy Neighbor" on the sign. They rebuilt the mosque. These are pictures from the St. Louis newspaper. And you can see life is sort of returning somewhat to normal in that community. But just imagine having your house of worship burned to the ground on purpose because people don't want you there. The community is kind of recovering. And you can see not a hotbed of Islam in this part of the world. If you go to Dearborn, Michigan, where Henry Ford brought over lots of Arabic-speaking workers for the auto industry, or maybe parts of New Jersey, but not really the Ozarks so much. Buddhist centers. Again, we're not a hotbed of Buddhism, although there are Buddhists in the Ozarks. And actually, most Buddhists in America are not immigrants, they're white, which is an interesting phenomenon. That was part of the attraction in the 60s to Eastern religions. This is not a white Buddhist temple primarily, but a Vietnamese Buddhist temple, and it is immigrants, and very new on the north side of Springfield, opened just recently. Hindu centers, again, places like California, Texas, New York. Missouri has 1 to 9 in 2006, probably more today. But they're there. Northwest Arkansas, Bentonville, where Walmart is. There is a Hindu temple. Grand opening recently. And you can see it doesn't quite look nondescript. There's some distinctive Hindu elements, even though I've seen much larger Hindu temples in the United States, in Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, places like that. They had to raise money. They don't pass the plate. They had a fundraising campaign. Krishna has graciously accepted our temple as his new sweet home. It's up to us to make him part of our lives and enjoy taking care of him forever. Alaska native, Asian Pacific Islander, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender, women, people with disabilities, Latinos. And part of this is corporate PR and spin, but part of it is a change in the Ozarks in some ways. And so when the Bentonville City Council had to vote, should we approve zoning for a Hindu temple, it was 4-0. Yeah, you can build your temple. This is America. But it's part of also, we want it to be good for business, because business is what makes Walmart run. And so you see immigrants flocking to the Ozarks. This is a map that just came out from the Brookings Institution, William Frey, a demographer, in a book called Diversity Explosion, or actually it's a report. Some communities are Hispanic concentration, so Southern California, South Texas. Some are fast growth concentration. Our area is new Hispanic destination from Vietnam were resettled in the Carthage area, but there aren't 40,000 Vietnamese in the area. They come from all over the United States in vans. People in Vietnam have heard of Carthage, and it's not because of precious moments. It's because of this event. There are also new religious movements in the Ozarks, and part of that is there was a back to the land movement, counterculture types, hippie types in the 1960s that wanted to move to rural areas and grow their own food and make granola and honey and there are still people like that. Our department secretary came to this area. Some of them were into founding new religions. And you think about it, cheap land, you're away from everybody else, nobody bothers you. And so, not only are we the buckle of the Bible Belt, but we're a haven for religious diversity. So there's the School of Metaphysics in Windyville. I love listening to weather in the Ozarks on my weather radio when they say, severe storms are moving through Windyville. And I'm like, well, oh, that's why they call it.
I live out that way. It's interesting.
Are there severe storms in Windyville?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Is that why they call it? I mean, is it more prone to wind than anywhere else?
I don't think so. I think they were just running out of names.
But it'd be a great poem, though.
I'll make one up.
Yeah. This is Christ Church Unity. Unity is kind of a cousin to Christian Science. This is a group called Pagans in the Park, which meets at Phelps Grove Park in Springfield. There's, I guess, a coven in Springfield. There's also growth of this last group, the no religion, the nuns, not the Julie Andrews Catholic nuns, but the people who say, I have no religion. And this is survey data on Greene County, which is where Springfield is. In 2008, there were 7.7% no religion. Now there's 11%. Now, that's hardly a takeover. That's 1 out of 10. And in fact, in America as a whole, it's over 20%. So the no religion folks are underrepresented in the Ozarks. They are a minority.